I want to tell you a story. The story of a group of people. A group of people with an impulse. An impulse that was a call to serve. And that service filled a need and bridged a gap. Swift-footed, mobile, adaptable, they treated countless victims. They saved lives. They banded together and served in remote locations, locations some dared not go. But then they found that there was also a need at home, and that need was also tangible and immediate. One tornado, one hurricane after another, and more destruction than they had the resources or manpower to respond to. So, they recruited, and that call was answered. Thousands of volunteers answered, on standby for each disaster, hoping to be deployed, given a t-shirt, maybe a cot to sleep on, a hot meal at the end of the day, given a mission, a purpose. And they found that they were healing more than the wounds of a storm. They were also healing the wounds of a war that forged a brotherhood and sisterhood, a war that instilled in them certain skills, a war that would forever change their perspective, a war that they would leave, but that would never leave them. Some were lost. Some were lost here at home. Every day, lives are lost here. But the call continues to go out. For they did not stop serving when they took off the uniform. They merely traded in that uniform for one with a symbol with a river running through it, a symbol of a gap, of a challenge that they must adapt to, be pliable to, and stay a step ahead of. And a call that must be answered, to serve again, to put others before oneself, to manage volunteers, to set an example, to do simple good, to bring order to chaos, to give relief, to give comfort, to give hope to others and to themselves. We've crossed the Rubicon. Now, we burn the boat.
All right, well, that's it. I'll see you guys later. It's kind of hard to follow up with that. I want to thank everybody for coming out today. I want to thank these Team Rubicon shirts that I see out here in the front part of the crowd. It's great to see that. So it's a pleasure and an honor to be here, to join you guys. You know, I've known Hunter Riley brought me in to come in and talk. I've known Hunter now for a long time, and he's become a very good friend. And I really appreciate the opportunity to come in and speak, and it's fitting that it's at the Clinton School here. President Clinton has been a tremendous friend and advocate of Team Rubicon for the last couple of years, and his work with Clinton Global Initiative, Clinton Global University, and the foundation have really benefited Team Rubicon over the last 2 or 3 years. And quite frankly, a lot of our growth can be attributed to his philanthropic efforts. So it's really fitting that I have the opportunity to come in here and pay it back in some small way. I understand, however, that I'm following either Ben or Jerry from Ben and Jerry's, and they won over the crowd with Chunky Monkey and Snickerdoodles or something like that. I'm not really sure which, but I don't have any of that. I'm going to try to wrestle up some other free bottles of water and throw them out in the crowd. I don't know what I can do. But anyway, I'm really happy to be here and share the message of Team Rubicon. I've got some lessons in social entrepreneurship that I'd like to share with you guys. But before we get there, I do want to talk a little bit about the story of Team Rubicon. It's a fairly unique story. I mean, as you followed in the video, we're not your average organization. We're a bit unique, and we take a lot of pride in that. And if you'll bear with me, you know, the story of Team Rubicon often, I guess, begins with my story, my personal journey, and how we get here today. In 2001, like many of you, September 11th changed my world forever. I was a freshman at the University of Wisconsin, and I walked downstairs into the cafeteria and I saw a bunch of my friends who were from New York huddled around a television screen. And for the next 15, 20 minutes, we watched as first, one tower and then a second one crumble down to the earth. And that changed my life forever. And I know it changed many, many lives in this room. It changed this world forever. As a freshman at a very liberal campus, it was an interesting time to be watching a nation go to war. I watched as we invaded Afghanistan first, and then 2 years later, I watched from my dormitory on CNN for 24 hours a day as we then invaded Iraq. That was a really interesting time to be a 20-year-old man in this country watching, men and women just like you, your age, that you went to high school with, that went to high schools just like yours across the country, march into a foreign nation, and to see flag-draped coffins continue to come home. And I had an urge then to serve, and it wasn't an urge that was strong enough, it wasn't an itch that was strong enough for me to scratch at the time. I was playing football for the University of Wisconsin, and it turns out I was a really bad football player. I'm going to be really honest with you. I was fortunate enough to have that opportunity, but to be quite honest, we were actually joking about this in the back before I came out here. I was a really bad football player. But Pat Tillman had a really profound impact on my life. I watched my freshman year as he walked away from a $1 million contract with the Arizona Cardinals to disappear in the middle of the night and drive up to Colorado and enlist in the United States Army with his brother. He didn't give any interviews, he didn't do any press, he did it purely out of service. And I paid attention to that over the course of the next 4 years. And then in 2004, right before my senior year, I was prepping to go to my sister's wedding when I was watching the news and I saw the news ticker at the bottom, break the news that Pat Tillman had been killed in Afghanistan. And I thought to myself, it's been pretty selfish of me to make excuse after excuse to not join and go and fight and serve alongside my fellow Americans. And it was at that moment that I decided that I was going to join the United States Marine Corps. So a couple of months later, I shipped off to boot camp. The Marine Corps shipped me out to sunny Southern California. I joined an infantry unit out in 29 Palms, and a couple months after that, in 2007, my unit was shipped off to the Anbar province of Iraq as part of the surge. And, like many service members that were a part of the surge, it was a very tough deployment. We were in the Sunni Triangle, and 2 weeks into my first tour, one of my first bunkmates was killed in a roadside bomb, and my squad leader was wounded. And there I was, 2 weeks into my first ever combat tour, and I found myself promoted into the role of squad leader. That was a really fascinating and enlightening role to be in, because for the next 7 months I had to lead 12 men outside the wire every single day, sometimes multiple times a day, on combat operations in the Anbar province. And you learn a lot about yourself, you learn a lot about people, you learn a lot about humanity, and that deployment didn't get any easier over the course of those 7 months. But I learned a thing or two about leadership. And I came back from Iraq. Obviously, I was changed, my whole unit was changed. I had the opportunity to join a different unit. It was a scout sniper platoon. And I took the opportunity, and I joined the platoon. I was fortunate enough to be selected to go to sniper school. I went, had about the worst 12 weeks of my life every single day, didn't think I was going to make it. I was fortunate enough to make it. And shortly after getting out the back end of sniper school, I was assigned to a unit, and we went over to Afghanistan as kind of a part of the pre-surge that President Obama ordered there. I went over to the Helmand Valley in 2008, and for anybody that follows what happens in Afghanistan, the Helmand Valley is a really, they're not building Marriotts in the Helmand Valley anytime soon. It's a really bad place. And day in and day out, we fought that war in a little 6-man sniper team. And once again, I learned a lot of really important lessons in life about risk, about taking risk, about accepting risk and moving forward. I got back from Afghanistan in late 2008, got out of the Marine Corps in late 2009. And I had no idea, truthfully, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I'd always had an entrepreneurial streak, and I always thought that I would want to start something of my own at some point in life. I had no idea what that idea was going to be. And since I really had no direction, I did what most rudderless 27-year-olds do. I started to apply to go get my MBA. And, you know, business schools never like hearing that part of the speech, by the way. So I started to apply to all these MBA programs. And I got in my last application. I got my first answer back in middle of January. And it was a rejection letter from Stanford. And that crushed me. I really thought that I was going to go to Stanford. That's really where I wanted to be. And 2 or 3 days after I got that rejection letter, my next step in life hit me square in the face. I woke up, and it was another one of those September 11th moments. It was the middle of January, and I turned on the news, and I saw the images coming out of Port-au-Prince. And you saw some of those images in that video. Now, that's our footage. That was all stuff that Team Rubicon took while we were down there 3 or 4 days after the earthquake. But I saw the images that were coming in from CNN, and I was transfixed. I could not leave my couch as I was watching the destruction come out across my television screen. And, you know, it was really simple. I was looking at it, and I was thinking, I've been there before. I've never been to Haiti in my life, but I have been there. And I watched it for 24 hours, practically straight. I was glued to the TV. You couldn't peel me off the couch. Next day, I woke up. I was still sitting there. My girlfriend walked in, and she sat down next to me. And I have a lot of bad ideas. I'm full of them. And usually she's not shy about telling me how dumb they are. And I looked at her, and I said, I think I should go down there. I think I should go to Port-au-Prince. She looked back. God bless her, this is probably why she's my wife now. She said, I think that's probably a good idea. She said, if you can find one other person that we trust, if you can put a team together, I think it's a good idea. So we got a team together. My co-founder, our now co-founder, William McNulty, called me up, and he said that he wanted in. And we organized this group of veterans and doctors over Facebook. We raised money to my personal PayPal account. And 4 days after the earthquake, we launched a team down to the Dominican Republic. Didn't really have a plan. There was 8 of us, but we knew we were going to go down there to help. We got to the Dominican Republic. We met up with our guide. And 4 days after the earthquake, we crossed across the border at the Jimani checkpoint, crossed into Haiti, hopped into trucks, and drove into the center of Port-au-Prince. And Port-au-Prince was like a war zone. 4 days after the earthquake, people were still crawling through the rubble, clawing for loved ones. You could smell death. You could hear the wails and the screams and the prayers. You could taste the smoke in the air and the dust that still hadn't settled back down to the earth. And it was terrible. It was really bad. And I can't say that it was like anything that I had experienced in Iraq and Afghanistan, although I had experienced just about everything that there is to experience in combat. But I had been there before in some way. And for the next 20 days, this group that we had come to call Team Rubicon conducted these mobile triage clinics all across the city. We went into parts of Port-au-Prince that nobody else would go, either because they couldn't or they weren't willing. And we were setting up mobile triage, medical triage clinics, treating terribly wounded people. We were treating them on site, and we were evacuating the ones that we couldn't treat and bringing them to upper echelons of care. And it was at some point during these 3 weeks where there were a lot of aha moments. But there was at one point during these 3 weeks where William walked up to me and he said, Jake, I think we're on to something. And it made sense. You see, for those 3 weeks, all we were doing was applying the same principles that we'd been learning for decades in the military. Principles of counterinsurgency warfare, principles of small unit leadership, principles of risk mitigation, risk assessment, emergency medicine, and applying them to help people. You know, we had been trained for war for years and years and years, but it turns out that much of that same training was applicable right there in Port-au-Prince. And the sad thing is that we have 3 million veterans from these conflicts with all these same skills. This surplus of unbelievable talent and experience. And truthfully, nobody was trying to harness it for this good. And so William and I had this discussion there in the middle of this field, in the middle of this compound that we were sleeping in. And we said, let's do this. Let's see if we can't improve disaster response by harnessing the skills and experiences of military veterans. Let's see if we can't make it faster more efficient, more transparent. Let's see if we can't shift this paradigm in some meaningful way. And so we came home and we tried to do that. And you know, we weren't entrepreneurs. We didn't have the training. We didn't know how to run a business, but we tried. A couple months later, a tsunami hit Chile and we launched a team there. A few months after that, terrible biblical floods hit Pakistan. And we sent a team of US military veterans into the southern Punjab region of Pakistan to deliver aid. Imagine how powerful that is. Imagine how powerful US foreign policy is at the end of US military veterans treating Pakistanis with gauze and medicine instead of foreign policy at the end of a Hellfire missile fired from a pilotless drone. Think about the consequences of that. We went to South Sudan and we went to Burma. And along the way, we started to realize something. You know, we were having an impact, we were having a meaningful impact in disaster response. We were doing good things, we were improving some systems, but what became really powerful was what we heard from our veterans. We started to hear this chorus of feedback from our military veterans telling us that whether they knew it or not, this is what they'd been looking for since they got out of the military. Telling us that I didn't know I was missing something until I found Team Rubicon. I didn't know the power of continued service. I didn't know what service had meant to me until I found service again. And so we started looking at how we could expand our programs. I mean, truthfully, what we were doing was very narrow. You know, 10 to 15 veterans at a time on these very small, acute surgical missions in crazy parts of the globe that were hard to get to. We had to expand the program somehow so that we could reach more veterans. And the urgency of that approach hit us only a couple months after that. In March 2011, I received a very tragic phone call. One of my best friends and my sniper partner, a guy that I had deployed to Iraq with, I helped evacuate him off the battlefield when he had gotten shot in an ambush that we were in. A guy that I went to sniper school with, a guy that I deployed to Afghanistan with, a guy that I served as the best man in his wedding, committed suicide in Houston, Texas. His name was Clay Hunt. He was an absolutely unbelievable Marine. Unbelievable Marine. He was an incredible human being. And he was with us that first time down in Haiti. And he came back and he was a staunch veteran advocate. He was very well aware of the suffering that he was dealing with. And he was a very vocal advocate for veterans to go and seek help and treatment for problems with post-traumatic stress and depression and moral injury. And he also said that service, continued service, was the one thing that he found to be cathartic in his search for an answer. The problem was that we were only able to get him on that one mission to Haiti, and we weren't able to continue to replicate that for him. And so when the dust settled from Clay's suicide, you know, we reevaluated everything that we were doing. We said, we need to look internally. We need to launch domestic programs. And we need to start deploying these teams of veterans here at home. It'll reduce the logistical strain. It'll reduce the level of skill that we require for some of these more high-speed missions, and we'll be able to get more veterans more involved more regularly. And only 4 weeks after his suicide, a terrible tornado tore through Tuscaloosa, Alabama. We had a decision to make. Truthfully, we didn't know what the hell we were going to do. We didn't have a clue. We had never done domestic disaster relief. We had never stepped into emergency management in any formal capacity whatsoever. We didn't know what the scope of work was going to be, but we knew we had to do something. So we activated teams and we sent, 25 to 30 military veterans down there, a platoon. And they rallied down there. They rallied with the local Tuscaloosa student veterans organization, and they went and they started clearing roads and helping families get back onto the road to recovery, clearing trees out of roofs, tarping up roofs expediently, and helping people put their lives back together. And it was at that time that we realized maybe we actually were now onto something. Because every night, these veterans would get together around this bonfire in rural Alabama, and they'd open up. You'd have an Army Ranger sitting there who had never, ever wanted to talk about anything that he had seen overseas in combat on 5 tours. But there he was, after a long, hard day's work, helping other people and opening up about himself. And finally coming to terms with what it was that he needed in his transition back to civilian life. And a month after that, Joplin, Missouri happened. and we deployed another platoon-sized element to Joplin, and things just continued to roll throughout 2011. We really started to pour all of our focus into these domestic programs. And things really came to a head last year, 12 months ago, nearly today, when Hurricane Sandy made landfall on the eastern coast of the United States. Our organization was, at that time, about 3,000 members across the country. We were strapped for resources. We didn't have the money to pull any large-scale operation, but we knew that Hurricane Sandy was going to provide us an opportunity. The need was there. It was widespread. The damage was immense. And so initially, we had about 85 to 100 veterans on the ground, and luckily, with some very generous corporate support, we were able to expand that to upwards of 500 veterans over the course of, I think it was 5 weeks. They managed 10,000 spontaneous volunteers, providing their leadership for the community that was rising up to help but didn't know what to do. And our organization has just continued to grow from there. This year in 2013, we've seen tremendous growth. We learned a lot of lessons in Sandy that over the course of this year, again culminating in Moore, Oklahoma with the terrible tornado that hit there, where we were able to deploy up to about 500 veterans for a period of 6 weeks, provide about $5 million worth of services back into the community. We've actually finally maybe found where our niche can be. We have proven that the principles of small unit leadership, the principles of military veterans and continued service are both good for disaster response and good for the veterans. And we're looking at how we as an organization can continue to expand and build on this model. There's a lot that we do. Our focus is very narrow in disaster response, but we obviously understand that there are many services that we need to provide our veterans. We're simply a conduit. We're an organization and a brand that is able to bring veterans to the table who may not otherwise be seeking out opportunities to get back involved with veterans organizations. So many men and women leave the military and they figuratively drop their pack and think that that's a chapter in their life that they want to close, and that they'll never reach back and get involved with the veteran organization. But what we've been able to do is craft a brand and a mission that provides some level of excitement and purpose back to a veteran that they actually seek out. What that does is it allows us to then perhaps help bring other services to the table that that veteran may or may not need. And every veteran, of course, is different on their transition from the military back to civilian life. Not every veteran is Clay Hunt. Not every veteran is coming home tragically, morally broken and seeking some deep spiritual or emotional help. But every veteran comes home on some part of this continuum of veteran transition and does need some help, whether it's employment services, whether it's education, whether it's help with substance abuse, whether it's just bad knees, whether it's just a void, that small little void in their life, whether they have a job and a family and a roof over their head, that small little void that says, I kind of miss putting on a uniform. I kind of miss putting on a uniform and serving something or someone other than myself. And that's no small thing to ignore. A lot of organizations, a lot of people in the veteran space choose to think only about these quantifiable and tangible pillars that veterans need. Again, jobs, housing, health, education. But we focus on those things that are a little bit more difficult to measure. That purpose, that community, and that sense of self. If we can provide that back to our military veterans, I think we're providing them with a foundation to be absolutely incredible civilian ambassadors. Being able to bring ideals of integrity and courage and honor back into institutions and governments and businesses in this country that now lack it. And so that's Team Rubicon. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into some of the more boring stuff here. As an organization, we've grown over the last 4 years, coming up on 4 years, not quite. And we've gone from no employees over the course of the first year and a half to we've got about 15 full-time staff now, a handful of part-time, and we've got about 15,000 members across the country. We had this little piddly group of 8 that crossed the border from the Dominican into Haiti. And it was an eclectic group. There were 5 veterans from all walks of life, 2 doctors, and a Jesuit brother. It's like the start of a bad joke. And, and now we have these 15,000 members across the country, and they're absolutely unbelievable. We've built an organization that finds its strength in its people. absolutely finds its strength in its people. We have people that are motivated to do absolutely incredible things. They just need that motivation channeled and harnessed. But that road hasn't always been easy. You know, I understand that, you know, here at the School of Public Service, social entrepreneurship is a topic that's being discussed and batted around. And naturally in academic circles, it's one of those things that often people find hard to wrap their minds around. How do you have an organization, for-profit or nonprofit, that has a social good but does good business? How does that make any sense? How can you do one or one without the other? And let me step back and say that I have two ventures that I'm a part of. Team Rubicon is certainly the one that I do most of my speaking about, and it's a nonprofit. We are a nonprofit 501c3 charitable organization, but we treat and run it like a business. I have another venture that I co-founded and I have no involvement in the day-to-day operations of. It's a for-profit. It's a for-profit technology startup. It's a mobile proximity-based social network for military veterans. It's called POSREP, or Position Report. And it was also inspired by the death of Clay Hunt. When we went to his memorial service in Houston, Texas, we discovered that there were 3 Marines that we had served together with in Iraq that lived within 10 miles of him in Houston. And none of them knew that that any of the others lived there. And I walked away from that memorial service and I thought how tragic that was. Because if anyone here has ever served in the military, they know that that peer support, that peer network, that band of brothers or sisters is the absolute most important thing that we have. But if you can't discover it, if you don't know that it's there, you can't rely on it. And so we went out and we built it only exists on the iPhone, but we built a mobile proximity-based network where when you sign up for an account, when you pull up the screen, you can see all the veterans around you based off of proximity. Then you can connect with them and create that social network offline. So I come at this from 2 different perspectives. I do believe that you can build a for-profit company with a social purpose, and I do believe that you can build a social purpose nonprofit like a company. And that's exactly what we've tried to do with Team Rubicon. So I'm going to talk about 4 of the lessons that I've learned through my journey in social entrepreneurship. And if you'll bear with me, I'm going to go through them, and then we're going to open it up to some questions. The first one is to build a team. You know, it's interesting how Team Rubicon got its start, right? And it's no small mistake that we've kept the name Team Rubicon. And somebody, I'm sure, will ask the question about why we named it Team Rubicon. And the questions, I'll leave that for the question and answer part. But, you know, we started this organization on the principle that it couldn't be done alone. It was a high-stakes situation. It was dangerous. There was a lot on the line. And no single person could do it. My girlfriend at the time realized that. I realized that. And we realize that still today. And building a team is a very deliberate process. Now, the team that we sent down to Haiti was a team that was largely brought together by fate, I have to admit. You know, 4 of the members were very deliberately selected. 4 of the members we met on the road while we were down there. And we never would have been able to pull the mission off as we did had we not met those 4 individuals on the road to Haiti, literally. That mission would have been a failure. They were pieces of the team that completed the team, pieces that we weren't even aware were missing. But the principles of building a team in a situation like this are pretty simple. You have to build a team that you trust. You have to build a team that you respect. You have to build a team that you would follow anywhere. So how do you build trust, right? Trust is kind of a buzzword, and trust is something that gets thrown around a lot. We think about trust in a couple of ways. In the military, trust is very inherent. But when you step back, trust is actually very deliberately cultivated in the military. And they do it through common training, so everybody knows that everybody else is on the exact same level as them. They do it through trials and tribulation, right? You have to go through some experience together and come out on the other end in order to build that trust. The first part's training, the second part is trial and tribulation. And we were, you know, truthfully, we were an organization that was kind of forged in a fire down in Port-au-Prince, but it really galvanized us. But any team, you know, whether it's an athletic team that has to go through 2-a-days prior to the season, whether it's you know, a motivational retreat for a company, there's science behind this idea that you have to go through trial and tribulation in order to come out the other end with some level of trust. It just doesn't happen. A team that you respect, I mean, that's obvious. You know, and then the final thing is a team that you'd follow anywhere. William and I, and William if I haven't mentioned it clearly enough, is our co-founder and has been obviously with us since he picked up the phone and called me and said he wanted to go to Haiti. William and I have a couple of rules when we're hiring. One rule that we always ask ourselves is, would that person have followed us to Haiti? We only want to add people to our team who would have had the spirit, the determination, the grit to have picked up the phone and said, yes, I will follow you 4 days after the worst earthquake in recorded history and go into a situation with that much risk, that much uncertainty, with that unclear of a mission, and I'll go. I'll put it on the line. And then we flip it around. That's generally a pretty easy one. I mean, you know, usually we don't let people get too far into the interview process before we answer that question. But we flip it around and we said, would we have followed that person? If that person had called us up, is that the type of person that we would have followed down to Port-au-Prince? Now, not everybody's a born leader, you know, and not everybody becomes a great leader. But it's not necessary to be a great leader to inspire people to follow you. So we always ask that question, and we always, at the end of any interview process or the end of any selection for any sort of leadership position, we always live by the mantra that passion trumps talent, but culture is king. As we've built our talent, as we've built our stable of people, whether it's key leaders at the regional level, whether it's full-time employees at the headquarters office, passion trumps talent, but culture is king. Take care of yourself. This is one that I certainly learned the hard way. Entrepreneurship sucks. It does. It has this sexy image right now because we see all these tech entrepreneurs IPOing after 5 years of business or getting acquired after 3 years and zero revenue, and you hear about Instagram getting bought out by Facebook for $1 billion and they only had 13 people on their team. And everybody thinks that entrepreneurship is just a good idea and you're 18 months away from never having to work another day in your life. That is not entrepreneurship, that is luck. There's a stroke of brilliance and genius in there, but there's a lot of luck involved with that. Entrepreneurship is 20-hour days, coach plane flights. I have plane flights in coach class on the red eye across the country, only to crash on your buddy's couch. Entrepreneurship is working yourself to the bone. Entrepreneurship is waking up every day and second guessing whether or not you're doing the right thing. Entrepreneurship is losing sleep about being able to meet payroll for your employees in the coming months. And very soon what happens is you stop taking care of yourself. And that's a really dangerous place to get in. William and I both have gone through this on a number of times over the course of the last 4 years. We've let our, physical fitness, which has always been a cornerstone of the Marine Corps, and William was a Marine as well, slide. And when your physical fitness slides, your mental and emotional health slides, I've allowed it to nearly destroy the relationship, with my now wife on numerous occasions, as I've had to, rationalize putting work in front of our relationship and all of these other things. And what you have to do is hit the reset button. And this comes from having a good team. Having a good team, in my case, a good partner, leads into this. Because we are able to keep each other in check. We're able to look at each other in the eye and say, William, you look like hell. Don't come into the work tomorrow. Go to the beach, run on the sand, take your dog to the park, go hit the reset button, come back, because everybody hates you right now. And you know what? Like, having that reset button hit personally every once in a while is absolutely necessary. And it's true. I mean, in our business at Team Rubicon, just about everybody was in the military. And so we know what it's like to go through a crucible. I don't need anybody to prove to me how tough they are. I can go 4 days without eating and sleeping and hike a huge pack up a mountain. I couldn't anymore. But I don't need to prove that to anybody. You do better work, you have better output when you're taking care of yourself. Your brand is your life. We were in a conversation earlier, or we were doing an NPR, little NPR interview before this. And we started talking about brand. And I don't think people today take the necessity of having a top-notch brand seriously enough from the inception of their idea. In today's world is so visible that not paying attention and investing in your brand from the very beginning is a deathly mistake. And it's something that we paid very careful attention to from the very beginning of Team Rubicon. Your brand isn't just a logo. Your brand isn't just some catchphrase or slogan. Your brand is everything. It's the 360-degree view of your organization. It's how you project yourself, how people perceive it. It's how you carry yourself as an individual, as a founder, as an employee. And your brand is truly your life. You have to make it larger than life. We talked about this before this, in that we had to fake it till we made it. We were an organization that had no full-time employees, absolutely no budget, but we invested, not money, but we invested a lot of favors and friends into building a strong online presence from the beginning, that when I would go to conferences, or William would go to conferences, they would think that we had 150 employees on 5 continents around the world. And we were putting up this facade. It was a curtain, and we didn't let anybody peer behind the curtain until we allowed, you know, our resources and our abilities to come and catch up with us. And it's something that has paid enormous dividends. And you have to treat your brand as sacred. You know, the one thing that everybody should know by now is that it could take a lifetime to build your brand. It'll take 5 seconds to destroy it. Absolutely will be destroyed in 5 seconds if you don't treat it as sacred and communicate it as such throughout all levels of your endeavor or your organization. Everyone needs to be an ambassador of the brand. Looking at you two, you guys are fantastic ambassadors. You look very good in your uniforms. Go. This is the last one. Nothing frustrates me more than seeing incredibly talented, passionate, intelligent people with brilliant ideas not do anything with them. At some point along the way, you have to make a choice. And it's a binary choice. It is yes or no. You are going to do this, and you're going to execute it, or you're not going to do it at all. And the sooner you say yes, the sooner you commit yourself fully to it, the better off you're going to be. So what's that mean? That doesn't mean it's a race to find the 100% solution. That doesn't mean it's a race to write a 300-page business plan that no investor's ever going to read. That means getting something out there. We call it the 80% solution at TR. Everything we do is based off the 80% solution. This is a mantra from the military. There's no such thing as a perfect battle plan. Hell, there's no such thing as a battle plan. It's not going to last. It's not going to last the moment you step outside the wire. That battle plan is not going to last. Certainly not the moment that somebody starts shooting. What is it that you're trying to do, and go do it. Find the 80% solution. Understand that the next 20% is found through action. I might be trying to get to that door. I don't know how to get to that door until I walk to that point right there. Then I'll maybe figure out how to get to the door. And there's this last one. It always, you know, gets some smiles from the crowd, but it's a saying from the Marine Corps: execute violently, or violence of execution. And truthfully, when you're talking to people in, you know, public service or you know, situations like this, you often see people cringe when I talk about violence of execution. But violence of execution is simple. Violence of execution means that you're not doing anything halfway. Violence of execution means that even the imperfect plan has a chance if it's executed with absolute gusto, with absolute commitment to mission accomplishment. Violence of execution means that you don't know how to quit. It means that you are willing to work your fingers to the bone and take a coach flight across the country and sleep on your buddy's couch for 3 straight days and take the red eye on the way back and take that meeting as soon as you land. That's violence of execution. And for anybody to think that entrepreneurship requires anything less than that is a fool. That's all I've got from that. I wanted to open it up to some questions. You know, talked about a lot here. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that anybody has. And you've got a microphone?
Yeah, we got mics.
And we've got 15,
We got some time.
15, 20 minutes.
Johnny, hold on. Come behind you.
I appreciate your presentation this evening, and one question I have, I'm trying to finish a book dealing with the fear of the weather, and I was doing some research about 75 minutes from here. FEMA has a threshold before they can declare federal disasters, and there are a lot of places that they won't help certain areas. Have y'all ever looked at coordinating with state departments of emergency management for certain areas? Because I thought that would really, I know there are places that could really use help too, and
this goes back to fake it until you make it, right?
Yeah.
We have, for the longest time, not been able to establish ourselves with state OEMs, Offices of Emergency Management. But we've consistently gotten into disaster zones and let our work do our talking for us. In fact, you know, we've often been excluded from disaster zones for lack of, you know, familiarity. But in the last 9 to 12 months, we've more often than not had state OEMs reaching out to us, asking for memorandums of understanding, and so we're getting towards that make it phase. Most recent example, two most recent examples, the state of Colorado activated us as a state-based resource for the recent flooding there, and then the small town of Wayne, Nebraska, north of here, got hit by a tornado about 3 weeks ago now, and the state, or not the state, the city, through some random connection with somebody that worked for the city, knew about us, asked us to activate and do all of their volunteer management coordination. So it is getting to that point, and yes, I think that's a great question, sir. In the
Yes,
back?
sir. 1 second.
I'm a veteran and I was in civil affairs, but what can a person 61 do associated with your organization?
Can you say that last part again, sir?
What can a person 61 in age do associated with your organization?
Well, you know, we certainly have a focus on post 9/11 veterans, but we have veterans in our organization as far back as Korean War. He is a very salty 83-year-old Marine Staff Sergeant, and he swears like a sailor. It's embarrassing, but you know, it's embarrassing for him. It's hilarious for me. We'd just love to have you involved. I mean, it's not like we have a senior citizens club within Team Rubicon. It's just Team Rubicon. Welcome to the team.
Anyone else? I thought there was something up here. Yeah. Right here. First, Bob. We'll go here. John? Yeah.
Does Team Rubicon coordinate and cooperate with the incident command principles employed by certain agencies of the federal government?
It's a great question. And that has been a part of our journey as an organization in professionalizing. When we first started, no. As I mentioned, when we first went to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, we did not know what we were going to do. And we actually resisted adopting what the gentleman is referring to is something called the National Incident Management Framework, NIMS, and ICS principles within it. And it's something that came out of 9/11 when they realized that all these emergency agencies that were responding to 9/11 weren't interoperable. So the fire department was working on different radio frequencies in the police department than Homeland Security, and nothing worked together. And so, President Bush issued this executive order decreeing that everybody had to adopt universal principles. It's called NIMS. We resisted it for a long time. We saw it as onerous. We saw it as bureaucratic. What we saw, though, during Hurricane Sandy was that we needed to adopt it, and we have adopted it organization-wide. We've hired experts in it. We train and emphasize training amongst all of our volunteers in it, and it's been a huge step in our process of getting that government endorsement, you know, from the state OEMs that this gentleman here was mentioning. In the
Yes,
back?
sir. Well, you first, and then we'll get to Angie. Yeah. You, Bob.
Thank you. Oh, well, I don't think I need the mic. Okay, sorry. I got this, sir. 2 questions. What's the significance of the Team Rubicon symbol?
Okay.
And also, can you offer more details, information about your second endeavor, about helping
Sure.
Local veterans?
Yeah. So the symbol goes back to the name. So the name Team Rubicon, before we launched to Haiti, we had built this team and we started to raise money online, and because everybody that was in the military wants to name everything, we said, oh, let's give this thing a name. And William we were bouncing names back and forth, and he had this list of Latin names, because Marines love Latin, even though we don't know what any of it means. And one of the names, or one of the words was Rubicon. And I recognized the word from branding, big corporate branding, like Jeep Rubicon, the Rubicon Agency. But I didn't know what it meant. So I looked it up, and the Rubicon was a river between ancient Rome and Gaul. And Roman generals were forbidden from bringing their armies back from Gaul into Rome across the river Rubicon. And to do so was punishable by death. And in early AD, Julius Caesar brought his army back across the Rubicon, and so that phrase has come to be known as the point of no return. And there was a river that separated the Dominican Republic and Haiti, and we treated that as our Rubicon. As soon as we crossed into Haiti, that was our point of no return. We weren't going back. So coming to the logo, what you see is the traditional symbol of humanitarian aid, the Red Cross. And this isn't a knock at the Red Cross, it's just the international symbol for aid. Canted onto its side, I don't know, that must be me. Canted onto its side with a river running through it. And that indicates in some ways that the current paradigm in disaster response is broken into two pieces, but also it represents the Rubicon, and the right-hand portion of the X is the olive drab green from the military, tying back to our military roots. Now, what was your second question, sir?
Regarding your second endeavor.
Oh, so the second endeavor, again, it's called POSREP, which is military slang for position report. You know, it's catching on to what's known as the mobile social proximity, MoSLO Pro movement of trying to make everything that's handset based, everything that's cellular based, able to talk to one another in a proximity atmosphere. So essentially, again, any user that downloads it is able to see on a radar other veterans in their vicinity. And then they're able to connect and see where that veteran served, what units they were with, and then connect and chat with that veteran, and hopefully at some point link up offline to start creating real community, real endeavors. The next step that we're trying to take with that is a partnership with both the VA and the DoD, wherein we'll be able to know when veterans are coming off of active duty. And if we can push POSREP into the TAP program, which is what every veteran exiting the military has to go through, it's a transition assistance program. If we can get them to download it then, when they get back to their home of record is actually that important part of the transition. They'll learn about services at Fort Benning or Camp Pendleton, but chances are they're not going to settle at Camp Pendleton. They're going to settle in Omaha or Brooklyn or Little Rock, wherever they came from. So if we can get them, if we can collate the services available to them based off proximity, whether it's in Little Rock, the health, employment, education, housing services available to veterans, and then offer that to them on a proximity basis, then we can help them discover just everything that is available to them out there as they come home. Does that make sense? All right. There was a lot of jargon.
Angie?
I apologize.
Thank you. I'm wondering, you talked about recruiting people from around your community. For example, you find people closest to you. Do they form teams that become self-sustaining under the same umbrella, or how does that play?
For Team Rubicon?
Yes.
So we have 15,000 members around the country, and they're organized into 10 geographic regions. So here in Arkansas, this is Region 6. There is a Team Rubicon Arkansas leadership team that helps organize things here in Arkansas. And then when a disaster happens, we do organize the community, the specific community that we're helping. Because what happens, and this is what should happen, is that when a disaster hits, it's not the government, it's not big organizations that come in and help that community recover. It's the churches, it's the schools, it's the synagogues that rise up, as neighborhoods and help one another. The problem is, often they don't know what they're doing and they're lacking leadership. Often, not always. And so we'll go in and we'll take a 27-year-old former Air Force tech sergeant, and we'll put that tech sergeant in charge of 15 to 20 local volunteers. Men, women, children, ages 16 to 66. And that military veteran will lead that squad throughout a day's worth of work. And that tech sergeant is able to provide the leadership that that community needs to get back on its feet. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi. I was wondering, do you feel, I'm coming away from this evening, that your core of people that work for the organization, volunteer for the organization, are spread across the personal political landscape. Is that true, or am I just being...
Well, as an organization, we're absolutely
60th
apolitical.
person here, you know?
As an organization, we're a-religious, apolitical, and as individuals, it's pretty funny to see the disparity between everyone along that spectrum, yes. Is there a follow-up to that?
No, I was just going to say that's what I was getting from it.
Yeah, I mean, politics never even enters into the conversation except for perhaps on somebody's individual Facebook account.
We have time for one more.
Hi, Anna Apple. I'm a student here at the Clinton School. I'm just curious if you guys have ever thought about going back into international crisis aid, or whether you've decided to really keep it domestically focused for the long term.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. About 80 to 90% of our program is really domestic now, but we have some of the most talented and experienced medics and engineers, combat engineers in the world, that their role is overseas. And that's why they come and join the organization. And so we continue to evaluate a lot of international opportunities, and we kind of put a pause on that part of our programming here in 2013 because we really wanted to focus inward. In 2014, we're really going to be looking at expanding our reach overseas. You know, in 2012, we still did a lot of work. We did a 5-month refugee crisis intervention in South Sudan. We trained medics on the Syria border, civilian medics. We went back into Haiti and trained motorcycle medics for the new national health care system. I think we went back to Burma and trained medics there. The other exciting thing that we're looking at doing, and this is slightly unrelated to your question, is we are looking to expand what it is that we're doing, the model of what it is that we're doing overseas itself. You know, we had a really profound experience during Hurricane Sandy. We had some Norwegian Afghanistan veterans reach out to us. They said, you know, military transition is not an American problem. You Americans, you always only think of yourselves, you know. It's like, you know, coming back from war is a problem that we all have, you know, whether we're Norwegian or British or you know, any of the other nations that participated in combat operations overseas. So we brought 6 of them in to Hurricane Sandy, and they worked alongside our veterans for about 2 weeks. And we had, you know, this tremendous experience. And so in 2014, we are looking at establishing chapters of Team Rubicon in those coalition nations. And we're really excited about that opportunity. The idea of a TR Norway, a TR UK, TR Canada, it really excites us. From a veteran service organization perspective, that's never really happened before. So we'd be excited to blaze that trail.
Jake, thank you so much for coming to the Clinton School. Hunter, thank you for helping, and we appreciate all you coming out tonight, and come and say hi.
Thank you.